As you'll see with a lot of the videos that I make, I'm trying to explore ideas that feel like they're very current, yet also perennial. They've lasted since time began. They're issues that we all wrestle with. My name is Solomon Lichtelem. I'm a South African director living in New York City. This is my Canal 180 Director ID. I had found this clip on YouTube about this event. It was taking place in Chios in Greece. The event, the Rocket Wars war that is held between these two villages, was started to create a sense of disruption and violence between these two towns so that it would keep the invading Ottomans at bay. I grew up in South Africa to American cinema, which is a lot of action. And so you think, oh, well, that is what cinema is. And it was only maybe 8 years ago that I discovered Eastern cinema, that I discovered that cinema could be spiritual. And that's such a big part of my identity, having grown up as a missionary kid and traveling with my parents, growing up all over the world. I didn't realize that cinema could be so close to who I am, and I saw Andrei Rublev, and it literally changed my life. I discovered Kubrick much later in my journey, and the impact that that film has had on me, because it doesn't just work on a pure logic level or a rational level. It's supra logical or supra irrational. It transcends it. And as I was working on this music video for this band called Aya, I felt like that the monolith, which is sort of a proxy for our screens today, but for me a deeper proxy for algorithms, I felt like I could make a film that was wrestling with the idea of how much agency we're handing over to these devices, to modernity. I wanted to make a film that felt like it had a sci-fi element, yet at the same time La Haine was another reference. So how can we bring something that feels ancient, the monolith, some of the settings of the film, against something that feels very modern? He Says He Needs Me for Young Fathers was really just a passion project, and I had written this idea of this prison mutiny, and finally it felt like there was an opportunity to make this idea come to life.
The beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth was the mouth of a lion.
The most dreaded creation of man, the monstrous walks again.
The dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority.
My parents were missionaries to Russia and to Siberia, to Krasnoyarsk and St. Petersburg and Moscow when I was between 7 and 9 years old. I would always see photos of the places they had been to in Siberia, and when I saw Karl de Keyser's work in particular, there was something quite nostalgic about it, something that weirdly felt like it was familiar to me on some level. And those books really sort of inspired the visual language of the film, the sensibility of a sort of a forgotten era. I usually like to shoot on film, but particularly for that film, I felt like it was really important to the style and the visual language of the film. Medicine was an interesting project. A DP friend of mine had come to me and said he wants some help creating a story out of these two real people. And initially we were working on a documentary, and I thought maybe let's just try and see if we could tell this almost like as a narrative story against a piece of music. And as we were cutting and we found this track, this Daughter track called Medicine that I had loved for years, it really just like all the puzzle pieces sort of fell in together. And I love stories of the American West. That landscape really speaks to me, the desert really speaks to me. And so to be able to tell this story essentially of two people that felt like proxies for my grandfather and my grandmother, particularly my grandfather.
You've got a warm heart, you've got a beautiful brain, but it's disintegrating.
It wasn't in the original treatment to do this scene with her putting on the dress. And we were outside the house that we were shooting that, taking a lunch break. And I said to Vicky, hey Vicky, does this resonate with you? If Terry gives you a dress and you put it on, but you can't see yourself in the mirror, and it sort of leaves a mark on you. And she immediately started crying, and she said, that's actually happened to me before. My daughter has given me a dress and I couldn't see myself. And she said, I'm going to just stop there, because if I talk about it more, we're not going to get through the day. The film I recently shot was for Little Simz, Flood. I had this idea of a matador fighting off a car, almost the status symbol of hip-hop and R&B is often cars, and I felt like I could make such an interesting anachronistic critique of the music industry and beyond's propensity for materialism or for consumerism.
I'm not a type to abuse of my power. Realness in the village I come from.
A perennial problem for all of us is to not be so enticed by the things that the material world has to offer, because the things that transcend that are relationships and community and things that are more ancient. I did a project called Young Father's Toy, a music video, and it's sort of a satire on world powers and world leaders. And when I did that film, I was like, there's something in that approach, in that comedic approach, in the satire that feels completely ownable to who I am and the way that I think about the world. But it sort of surprised me that an idea would go there. And that sort of unlocked something within me to think that maybe I can actually do a narrative in the same way, and Epiclesis came from that. The story itself sort of comes from something deeply personal.
I went to school with Ivan. He was serious even then, shy, didn't talk to girls. We all thought he was kind of, you know.
And you? Who do you love?
Then we realized it's God he loves. Me, I love the women too much.
One of the other themes that runs through my work is miscommunication, is people not being seen for who they are or their actions being misinterpreted. And that was at the heart of the story for Mudder. A friend of mine, Luca Degani, had sent me sort of a basic outline for a story that he had discovered about these miners that were called in. They were the first called in the area of Donetsk when the MH17 flight was downed by Russian separatists. And the unique insight there was these accounts of people hearing phones ring in their neighborhood, in their backyard, in the fields, and coming to these phones that were scattered amongst debris and detritus and bodies, really, and hearing people in a foreign accent or a foreign language sort of speaking to them and them not being able to communicate. And that was a really fascinating insight for me. Three months after we shot the film, Russia invaded Ukraine, and I felt at the time that if I don't make that film then and there, the opportunity wouldn't be there. And there was no idea of a Russian invasion being on the horizon. So I'm very thankful that we were able to tell that story when we did.
Виталик!
The work that I want to do is almost like you enter through the gutter, but you leave through the cathedral. And sort of meeting people with where they're at in the stories, but also leaving them in a space of looking into themselves and then looking beyond, having their eyes turned upwards.